will you pledge tonight that you will not declare victory until the election has been independently certified? President Trump, you go first.
I'm urging my supporters to go into the polls and watch very carefully, because that's what has to happen. I am urging them to do it. I am urging my people. I hope it's going to be a fair election. If it's a fair election, I am 100% on board. But if I see tens of thousands of ballots being manipulated, I can't go along with that.
The worst moment in last night's debate, I thought, was the president continuing a frontal assault on both the legitimacy of the election and the administration of it in a free and fair way, urging his supporters to go physically intimidate people at polling places, which is just not an idle thing to say. I mean, the Trump campaign is already actively organizing this effort, recruiting able-bodied men and women to do it. Now, there is a long and ugly history of this kind of tactic being used, particularly to intimidate voters of color, all the way back to the Reconstruction South. In fact, there were voter intimidation tactics in use for so long by Republicans that courts had to ban those tactics for decades. But in 2018, Republicans won a court battle to overturn and get out from under those legal protections. And so the Trump campaign is trying to do things like send poll watchers out into Philadelphia, even though, as the Philly Inquirer reports, the Trump campaign has no poll watchers approved to work in Philadelphia at the moment. There are no actual polling places open in the city right now, and elections officials are following coronavirus safety regulations, such as those limiting the number of people indoors. But that does not stop the president from lying about it during the debate last night.
As you know, today there was a big problem. In Philadelphia, they went in to watch. They were called poll watchers, a very safe, very nice thing. They were thrown out. They weren't allowed to watch. You know why? Because bad things happen in Philadelphia.
Here to talk about the law actually says is Pennsylvania Attorney General Josh Shapiro. It's great to have you, Mr. Attorney General. I guess let's start with just what the law of your state says. Obviously, people can be poll observers. Both parties will often have those kinds of people. But the idea of like a group of people showing up to watch people at polls can also be intimidating. Yeah. What does your state law say? What are the protections available for folks?
Well, I'm happy to get into the law, but first off, I just want to thank you for using the word lying, because that's exactly what the president's doing. He didn't misspeak. He didn't misrepresent. He flat out lied, and that's what he continues to do, float these crazy conspiracy theories that have been debunked time and time again. You know, as the Attorney General of Pennsylvania, I deal with facts and evidence and the law. So let's talk about that. The president talked about what happened in Philadelphia just the other day. Here's the deal. These voters were going to an early voting center. At an early voting center, the law doesn't afford any candidate or any party to have a poll watcher there. They're only afforded to go to the polls on Election Day. And then the president goes out and spews this nonsense about how they were turned away. It's simply not true. It's also important to note, legally, the president has sued us in Pennsylvania to make it harder for people to vote, number one, and number two, to create an environment where people can be brought in from other counties to do poll watching in certain counties. And let's be very real about what this is all about. This is about bringing people into black and brown communities to try and intimidate them. That's what the president of the United States and his enablers are trying to do. Let me be very clear about something. As the chief law enforcement officer of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, I sure as hell won't let him get away with that.
There are a number of lawsuits right now that are being contested, a sort of alignment of the Trump campaign, the state GOP, and state Republican lawmakers attempting essentially to make it harder to vote and make it easier to throw out ballots. I think those are the two sort of lines that they've pursued. Yeah, right. So, I think that the folks on the other side have won a lot of those suits. They went to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, but they're going to try to bring this all the way to the Supreme Court. Is that right? I mean, they're still fighting this stuff.
Well, let me just correct you. I want to make sure we're clear. We've won these suits. We've won in our defense of the statute. And by the way, I think it's really important to note that while other states have been voting by mail, some for more than a decade, this is relatively new. In Pennsylvania, under Governor Tom Wolf's leadership, we passed the vote by mail statute a year and a half ago. And guess what, Chris? More Republicans voted for that statute than Democrats did. This is a bipartisan effort that should bring people together until Donald Trump started speaking up and tweeting and scaring a bunch of Republicans on the ground. It really was a bipartisan effort. And now he is in court, in our state courts and in our federal courts, suing to try and make it harder for people to be able to vote. I'm just not going to allow that.